Okay.
Okay. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, let me get a whiteboard so that we can illustrate this. And maybe we'll have a better grasp of the teaching. Okay. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 12. To the rest, I say this, because at this point, he's encouraging people to stay in marriage, right? Stay in your marriage. So to the rest, I say this, I, not the Lord, if any brother has a wife who is not a believer. Okay, that's easy enough to illustrate. Brother and his wife. So it says, if the brother has a wife who is not a believer, okay, so let's just put unbeliever. My screen is freezing up. Let me fix this. I do this for the sake of just letting us meditate and let these concepts sink in. So you have a husband who's a believer. His wife is an unbeliever. Okay, that's reality. We deal with that. She has a characteristic that she's willing to stay in this marriage. Okay, so even though they're unequally yoked, but she's willing to stay. Okay. His instruction is you must not, do not, maybe it's better to say must not divorce. So you got to keep that marriage together, right? Okay, that's a clear instruction. You're not supposed to seek or desire to be divorced from an unbelieving spouse, especially if the unbelieving spouse is willing to stay, right? Okay, stop me if you want me to pause. Verse 13.
Pastor Bert, I just find it interesting how it says how he consents to live with her. What does that, I don't understand that really. Like they're married, but the person doesn't have to live with the other person is what's being said here?
How does your verse 12 read?
Okay. It's the Amplified Version. For the rest I declare, I, not the Lord, that if any believing brother has a wife who does not believe and she consents to live with him, he must not leave her.
So she consents to live with him.
Yes. That's
which
confusing.
is another way of saying she's willing to live with him even though they don't have the same faith.
Yes, but is that how it is with a married couple? The wife does consent whether she's living with him or not? Is what's being said here?
Well, what you see in relationships between husband and wife,
okay,
and they both have different religions, they find themselves in different religions, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of them converts to Christianity. Now what are you going to do? See, me and my wife, here's a scenario. Me and my wife were atheists. Well, I come to faith in Jesus. But stays an atheist.
That's such an odd pairing, though, that you have a husband and wife that are married, and then you've got one person who is choosing to be a believer, so they're kind of separated right there.
Well, they're separated in the sense of religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
that's pretty big, though.
They still live together.
But then it says, and she consents to live with him.
Yeah, which means she's not willing to, she's not trying to get out. She's not trying to leave the house and say, I'm divorcing you.
It's so interesting. Okay. I have
Yeah. One of
that
the things
odd thing.
one of the things we deal with as pastors is we deal with different marriage scenarios.
Oh, I'm sure.
And this is just one example right here.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it being so written so long ago in the Bible that I expected something different then.
No, it happens
And
still today.
Oh, I know, today especially.
Yeah, so there's nothing new under the sun in that
I
sense.
guess not.
No, but we're looking at this scenario objectively.
Mm-hmm.
She's an unbeliever. He's a believer. She's willing to stay in the marriage, though. And his instruction is, don't divorce her. Why? Because she's willing to stay in the marriage. But she's not, believing the way I believe. She doesn't.
Yeah, I can't.
Does not have the same faith I do.
And I can't see that being a separating issue in my heart.
But that's why it's, just take it at face value. He's giving marriage instructions, and he's saying, don't divorce her.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, that's basically, now, as a
I'll have to
husband,
read through this a couple of times. Okay.
for example, as a husband, if I'm married to an unbeliever, I would be frustrated, right? She doesn't ever want to go to church. She doesn't want to study the Bible. She's just frustrating, right?
Sure, it starts to separate you because the beliefs are changing.
Yeah. So in the religious sense, there's a separation in the religious views, right?
Yeah.
And so my desire, in this frustration is, I want a divorce. I want to divorce her. But the scripture says, if she doesn't want to divorce you and she loves you, but she just disagrees with your belief system, well, don't divorce her.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to learn, right?
Okay, yeah.
Instructing us. That's why I have to, that's why I'm illustrating it on a whiteboard, because, we could look at it more objectively that way.
Let's do that.
Yeah. And so then he does a vice versa. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer, so now let's look at another scenario, just for the sake of, so a woman is now married to an unbeliever. The man is the unbeliever. Okay. So it's the same thing, right? And if the woman has a husband who is not a believer and he's willing to stay, see, the attitude of the unbeliever is, I'm willing to live with you. I'm willing to stay with you, even though you've changed and have become a believer. Willing to stay. Okay. She must not divorce him. Again, it's the same, vice versa.
Yeah.
Must not seek a divorce. Okay. That's instructions for believers in dealing with being married to an unbeliever, whether you're a man who's married to a wife who's an unbeliever but willing to stay, or a woman who's a believer but is married to an unbeliever who's willing to stay. Don't divorce. See, so what's consistent about these two is, don't divorce your unbelieving husband or wife. That's pretty clear cut, right?
Yep.
I'm illustrating it so that we can be more objective in our analysis. Now, and this is where it got complicated, because, see, here is a believing wife right here, right? And remember, what is the instruction? Submit. You are to submit to your husbands. Not right?
Yeah.
So that's where it becomes extra challenging for
Yeah.
a woman
Like it would.
in this relationship, because she is supposed to submit. Now, look at what the husband has to deal with. The husband, right, is not to want to divorce his wife, but he has been given the instructions. Wife should submit.
Yeah. Apparently, it's different as far as beliefs go, like religion.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a believer and an unbeliever.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that's why I think the submission.
So the challenge with the husband is to try to teach his wife, to submit, right? Because that's what he knows. The Bible teaches wives should submit. Even though you're an unbeliever, it's right, because the Bible teaches that you, as my unbelieving wife, should submit to me, your husband.
Right.
Okay. So that's, that's what he has to work with. Wife should submit, while at the same time, when you're dealing with the wife who is a believer and her husband is an unbeliever, she has a choice. Does she submit or not submit? What do you think?
He must submit.
Even though he's an unbeliever, right? Because that's her choice, either submit or not submit. And since she's a believer, she understands that a wife must submit to her husband. Are you guys processing this with me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Pastor.
Okay, we keep going then. Okay, we keep going. Verse 14 is an interesting phrase. Okay. And look what it says in verse 14. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified. Okay, so we're looking at this scenario. The unbelieving husband, I guess we got to put God in the mix, right? When you put God in the mix,
I think so.
how do I get this thing? I'm trying to. Okay, when you put God in the mix, oh, please. I'm struggling with my device. Oh my goodness. I'll get it. Don't worry. Okay. So when you put God in the mix, put God in the mix. And obviously, God sees you as a believer married to an unbeliever. And this is what it says. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife. So because of the wife, the unbelieving husband has been sanctified. Does anybody have a different translation?
Where are we, Pastor?
1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 14. Okay. So because of the wife and her relationship with God being a believer, she's been sanctified. Because of her husband is sanctified. Have you ever thought of the unbelieving husband being sanctified?
No.
Right. Right. I never
No,
thought about
not
it.
at all.
But isn't that what it says in verse 14? If you want to read
Yes.
your translation, feel free to share.
It's the same.
Okay, so this idea of sanctification or sanctifying your husband in this scenario, right? It's as if to say, because of you, I don't know how else to say it, they're going to be saved.
I can read my
Or because of you, they're set apart, set apart for God, sanctified. Go ahead, Ophelia, what's yours say?
This is the NLT,
Yeah.
verse 14.
Mm-hmm.
For the Christian wife brings holiness to her marriage, and the Christian husband brings holiness to the marriage.
Okay, so
Otherwise, your children would not be holy.
okay,
But now they are holy.
okay. Are you guys
Praise the Lord.
processing this? So even though an unbeliever who's willing to stay with you is not believing like you yet, there is that sense that because of you, your unbelieving husband is sanctified. He's been in this place of holiness, which is set apart. It's as if God says, because of you, your husband is counted as holy to me, sanctified. I know that's
That
hard.
really
Yes.
makes sense, Pastor. It really makes sense because once you get married, you become one with your spouse, right? So God sanctified that.
That's beautiful.
That's true. It's one. The two shall become one.
Yeah.
That's why the logic fits, right? The logic fits that the unbeliever is sanctified and holy because of the oneness in marriage. Now let's look at their children.
And Pastor, I remember the verse. It says, "One believer in the family, the Lord will save the rest of the generation." Something like that in the verse.
Yeah, let me know if you find the verse for that. But
Pastor, I have one different.
here is the children now. We got to acknowledge the children. The children of a married husband and wife, and one is an unbeliever. What does Paul say about that? Right? The children. It says,
The children will
The
be
children belong to God. Yes.
Yeah, they will be holy.
it says, otherwise your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy.
Yeah.
And so because of the wife being a believer, the impact is to make the children holy.
Yes.
See? That's what we're looking at when we're talking about a scenario of a husband and wife, and one is an unbeliever. Don't seek to divorce because the relationship that you have with your unbelieving husband, wife is holiness and sanctification. There is that sense that God did something on their lives. There's something, they're marked. Let's just put it that way. They're marked by God, and they're marked as sanctified and holy. And then the children are also marked. Your children with your unbelieving husband is also marked and sanctified as holy.
More room for her to.
Yeah, but she likes to be with you.
Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so that's why we're reading it word for word, trying to understand it, because that's the heart of our study, is to try to understand it. So let me read it one more time. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer and he is willing to live with her, she must not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. So it goes vice versa, right? Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. There it is. Now you understand this issue with unbelieving husbands and wives. And we shall continue. Verse 15. Somebody read verse 15.
Okay, Pastor, but I'll read. But if the unbeliever lives, let it be so. The
Okay,
brother.
stop.
Okay.
So, so now we're looking at this, right? The unbeliever. If this unbeliever, instead of willing to stay, right, they leave.
Let them.
Okay, so if they said, I'm leaving you, you religious freak, I'm leaving.
On a jet plane.
I don't believe you. I don't believe your religion. I'm leaving.
Them leave.
What should he do?
Go.
Let it be.
First, his attitude is, I don't want a divorce, right? Right? That's his first attitude. I don't want a divorce. I don't care about what you think. I'm leaving you. So his response to that is,
Let it be so.
let it be so.
Yes.
Okay. So,
Let them go in my translation.
okay. If you want to leave,
Go.
Go.
goodbye.
Goodbye. Adios.
See? So
And
look at the
don't forget.
scenario he's giving us to look at. If she's willing to stay, don't divorce her. But if she says, I'm leaving you, does that mean he can divorce her now?
Yes.
Yes.
It seems that way, right?
Yeah.
Because he says, let her go. Then, okay, if you want to leave because of, you're against what I believe, then let's file a divorce. Because I'm gonna let you go. She's leaving. Maybe she says, I'm gonna be with a man who doesn't believe. He's an unbeliever like me because I'm tired of your religion. And so obviously that means he would have to let her go with a divorce. That fits, right?
Yes.
So that seems to be where divorce is okay here, because they want to leave. I can't force you to stay with me. So that's what we're processing. If somebody disagrees and says, no, I don't think he should divorce because God doesn't want divorce, well, it's complicated, right?
Yeah, it doesn't seem right, but the way it's stated here, it seems like it is okay.
Right?
Mhm.
Because it's complicated. Okay?
Yeah, that's what complicates the picture. Yeah.
So, but if the unbeliever leaves, let him do so. Okay? And if the unbelieving wife, either way, let him go.
Mhm.
Okay? So now let's continue. It says, a believing man or woman is not bound in such circumstances. So, when we say divorce is okay, and in that sense, he's not bound. He's not bound. If you, let's read another translation. Go ahead. I think you have the Amplified. So let's look at the Amplified.
Mine is NIV, Pastor Bert.
Oh, okay. Let's read. Oh, well, that yours is the same as mine.
Yes.
Who has another translation? I think Diane, did you have the Amplified?
What verse, Pastor? 15?
Yeah, 15.
I have a question.
Mine is NLT, New Living Translation.
Okay, and then we'll get to Manny's question after that. Go ahead.
But if the husband or wife who isn't a believer insists on leaving, let them go. In such case, the Christian husband or wife is no longer bound to the other.
Okay, so no longer
At
bound.
first,
Yeah, let's just stay with that. So
yeah,
not bound to spouse,
yes, not bound to each other.
right? Which
Oh,
obviously gives me the indication that it's okay to divorce
Mm-hmm.
because the unbelieving spouse left you, abandoned you to marry somebody else. So, you know, then you're not bound to your spouse anymore. Okay?
Yeah. For it says here, for God has called you to live in peace.
mhm,
So
mhm.
so the whole point is for you to live in peace.
Yes.
Okay? Live in peace with the fact that your spouse left you for reasons of different belief system. But God wants you to live in peace. Okay, Manny, what's your thought?
Going back to the unbeliever, you mentioned that the unbeliever will be sanctified because his wife or the other person is a believer.
Yeah.
This sanctification
What's that?
process, the sanctification process, is that instantly or is that a gradual 50 years in the making?
I think it's like both.
We
It's
don't know.
both.
Where are you going?
To Taco Bell.
It's like,
Can I ride with
hold
him?
on, let me fix the
Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's both, Manny. And the reason why is because in one sense, they've already been, you know, acknowledged as sanctified. They've already been acknowledged as holy. Now, we also understand that you're holy, you know, as believers, we're made holy, but we're also being made holy at the same time. You're holy, and at the same time, you're being made holy. So it's once you're holy because of your faith in Jesus Christ, and then the process of continuing and growing in this holiness is a lifetime. So does it apply to the husband? Once the wife and the husband are one, and he's sanctified and holy, yes. Now, my understanding is the way we become holy is when we become believers, right?
That's my understanding.
Yes.
So if he's an unbeliever and yet he's still sanctified and holy, I don't know if it's a process. It could be, but it doesn't seem to, you know,
It doesn't indicate that.
it doesn't indicate that it's a process for them to be
No.
holy or the children to be holy. It's like they're already made holy. It's as if God says, because of you, wife, I look at your husband and your children as part of you, and therefore they're acknowledged. I acknowledge them as being holy. And remember, God doesn't live under our time, right?
Right.
Right.
So he can look at them as holy because he sees 50 years or 100 years from now that they'll come to faith and be holy. I don't know, but that's a process that, you know.
Maybe a better way of saying it is that their sanctification will be fulfilled in the sense of they'll be made more holier.
What's that?
They'll be made more holier.
Yeah, that's not clear, only that it's a done deal as far as God is concerned.
Yeah, we have to look at it through his eyes.
Yeah, as far as God is concerned, he's holy,
Yeah.
he's sanctified. And then the children of the unbeliever and believer, they're holy, they're sanctified.
Through God's eyes.
It's God's work. It's not, the believer's work, but it's because of the believer that God does this. Because he does it through the spouse, the believing spouse. So God is working through this believing spouse, making the unbeliever holy and sanctified, making the children holy and sanctified. And it doesn't mean this believing wife is perfect, right? The only
Right.
qualification is just to be a believer, not a perfect wife and not a perfect mom. She's just a believer. But God does all that to the rest of the family. That's my take, and that's why if anybody has any other views, we're definitely open to taking a look at it. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So it says you're not bound, okay, in such circumstances. God has called you to live in peace. And then look what it says in verse 16. How do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? See? So the wife can have a role in this scenario, right? She could end up saving him, right? Isn't that what it says? How do you know? It says that you might save him. Is that what it says?
I don't see it that way.
Read verse 16 then.
Well, it's like yours, but it says, "For how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband?"
Stop. How will you know, wife, whether you will save your husband?
Yeah, and mine says, "By leading him to Christ?" ?
Yeah, see, so you don't know what's going to happen in the future. Even though he's an unbeliever, right? You don't know that one day he will become saved. You don't know that, but it could happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And all this is to process. So don't divorce him if he's an unbeliever. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
it's a
saying it that
struggle with
way.
the believing wife that says, I want to divorce him because he's an unbeliever. He doesn't follow Jesus. Well, how do you know he won't be saved in the future?
So are we saying, in other words, there's hope there?
Of course.
By putting it that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if he's an unbeliever today, it doesn't mean he's going to be an unbeliever forever. He can get saved tomorrow.
Yeah.
So don't divorce him is the instruction, right?
And putting that sanctification on the unbelievers by being with a believer is setting that precedent,
Yeah, it's almost a guarantee they'll be saved.
Pretty much.
And what does it mean to be saved? Anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved.
Yeah, right.
So maybe he'll continue to reject your religion for years and years and years, but at his deathbed,
Yes.
Yeah.
maybe that's when he'll be so afraid of going to hell, he'll now call on Jesus to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
See, so it could happen.
It's always there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what Paul is telling the believing wife and believing husband who's married to an unbeliever. It could happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So verse 16, how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife?
Mm-hmm.
See?
Yeah, Pastor, I believe that the Lord wants us, a believer, to live in a hopeful faith. full of hope.
Yeah, I mean, this process of, you're a believer, he's an unbeliever, you have children, maybe some of the children are unbelievers, some of them are believers, mixed because of you. And because of you, you have a decision. The decision is whether you should divorce him or not. Well, if he wants to stay with you, then you shouldn't divorce him. Is that complicated, right?
It can be.
It's like the husband saying, honey, I love you. I just don't want to believe like you.
Then
And
that's
then
when
she
we
has
become
to process the fact that he doesn't want to believe like me, but he loves me, but he doesn't believe like me. And he wants to stay in this marriage, but I am so tempted to want to get a divorce. And Paul's instruction is, don't divorce. You must not divorce.
Yeah,
See how complicated these things can be?
can be. Yeah.
But it's interesting that we can study it.
Yeah, I like the idea that there's an umbrella over it, though, of saying that you're married to an unbeliever. I mean, you're a believer and an unbeliever together, but the believer covers the family by being the one believer.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's what makes it so
Your
beautiful.
husband, your unbelieving husband, your unbelieving children, let's just put it that way,
Yeah,
are made holy and sanctified
yeah, that's the main,
because of you.
right.
What?
And that
so-
might encourage
So it's
the
like,
others.
so don't divorce.
Right.
What is it, Manny?
Question.
Yeah.
Did Paul, is this Paul's writing, verse 16, influenced
It
by the
seems
Holy-
like it because Paul, remember in 12, it says, I say to the rest of you, not the Lord, but I say. So this is like human level.
Okay.
I'm just speaking to you on a human level. This isn't God's command. I'm saying to you what I think is the right thing.
I have a problem with verse 16 when Paul writes the fact that
What's that?
I'm trying to get the word out. Bear with me.
Yeah, the verse 16 says, how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife?
You will save your husband or you will save your wife.
Yeah.
Paul, we can't save on someone else. We can't even save ourselves.
Yeah. In what sense does he mean? How do you know you might save them?
Yeah, that's where I'm struggling with.
All you got to do is look at it from his frame of reference.
I think I see this verse. The Christian person must continue to seek the God deeply and live by the fruit of the Holy Spirit. This is a challenge to a believing spouse.
Yeah,
This verse.
and then what Paul wants to process in this is that who knows, you might save them,
right,
by your life.
Yeah.
Because of your faith, because of your life, you might just save them.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not you saving them, because we can't save anybody.
But you might encourage them through that.
They become saved because of your conduct. They see a different life in
Yeah.
you, like the
Yeah.
light of God in you. Then they like, I want that light,
So the frame of reference is you don't, because we know theology that it's God who saves, but God will use you to save them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, good. And on that note, that's as far as we've gotten, right?
We have 50 more years to go.
Yeah, and this chapter 7 about marriage, relationships, you know, and there's an interesting dynamic is, you know, some of it is God's clear directions and some of it is Paul's personal take.
Mhm.
You know, this is one of those rare times when Paul is giving his personal take when he says, this is from me, not from God. You know,
Yeah.
and this is from God, not from me. So, so I give this command, not I, but the Lord. And then later it says, to the rest, I say this, not I, not the Lord. Do you see that?
Yeah.
If you look at verse 10 compared to verse 12, this whole idea of this is me, Paul, telling you, this isn't from God. This is God telling you, this isn't me. It's kind of an interesting dynamic in this issue of dealing with marriage, you know. So that's as much as we can handle for this evening. And
One other question.
yeah, go ahead, Manny.
How does it feel to be another year older?
What? Why are you asking that?
I talk to God about this all the time. So, you know, because I acknowledge, and I don't know if you guys do, but I acknowledge Psalm 90. It says it's appointed for man, you know, to be 70 years or 80 if he has the strength.
Wow.
So if you're over 80, you're on bonus, right? If
Yeah.
you are
In your
70,
60s?
you know, that's about the time when people will pass. And then you're over 70, it's because God has given you the strength to keep living up to 80.
Yeah, God gave me
I
bonus.
believe that.
So I'm processing it the best that I can when I talk to the Lord about, you know, I'm 63. If I were to die at 70, as you know, as indicated, I only have 7 years left. If God allows me to live to 80, then I have 17 years left. And if God allows me bonus, then 17 years plus is what I'm looking at.
That's a good amount of time, Pastor
So
Barry.
this is how I process it, Manny.
Me
Here's the verse. If you guys want to look, go to Psalm 90.
Psalm 90:10.
getting short. I
Baby Catherine has it.
Okay, read it for us, baby Catherine. Psalm 90, chapter 90, verse 10. Go ahead.
Our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures. Yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow.
Yeah. So
For
it could be 70 or 80. That's the point.
Okay.
The rest of the chapter, maybe we'll cover it one day because there was a time when I did meditate and memorize that chapter at one time, Psalm 90. And it's written by Moses, by the way. So it's a psalm written by Moses. Yeah. The only psalm,
Beautiful.
I believe, that you can find written by Moses.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, but that's how I'm processing
Nice.
it, Manny. So to answer your question, I'm processing it with that understanding that, Lord, if I have 70 years, there's later in that chapter, it says, teach me to number my days that I may gain a heart of wisdom. It's in the same chapter. So that's my attitude.
It's the
too.
next verse 12.
Read it.
So teach us to number our days that we may cultivate and bring to you a heart of wisdom.
Yeah. So that's my prayer.
That's so lovely.
I need to, you know, number my days. So I'm thinking that's why 70, I only have 7 more years left.
And some of
Or
us don't have
10 more
any.
years.
So Pastor Bert, you're doing just fine.
Yeah. See, so that's why with this, and remember, this is by Moses. So you got to remember the frame of reference from Moses, right, is taken into consideration in this Psalm 90. But, you know, that's the attitude I need to have, right? Lord, teach me to number my days that I may gain a heart of wisdom. If the days I have left is 7 years or 17 years, then I still want to have a heart of wisdom to live for you for the next 17 years. It's all I can do, right? Pretty much the attitude that I need to develop.
Yeah. Since
Yeah.
we've
For
known
asking
each
that
other,
question, Manny.
since we've known each other,
Yeah.
since we were in our 30s, and now we're in our 60s. It's like that's a long, long time.
Time flies, huh?
Oh yeah.
How time flies. It's been 30 years since we've known each other. See,
Wow.
you know, time flies. But that's the attitude I'm trying to, maintain. On that note, Manny, could you close us in prayer?
Father God,